Hi guys, so today we are going to talk about we're going to talk about chapter 21, and then we are going to read chapters 22 and 23. So chapter 21, it was 9 o'clock in the morning and they were still at the house. Cecile did not like this at all, right? Delphine explained to Cecile that she was scared that the girls might get hurt at the center because it is dangerous. Cecile says that things get dangerous when guns are involved, but as long as nobody points a gun at you and no one puts a gun in your hand, you'll be okay. So then Delphine decides that they're going to go back to the center, but they will not be going to the rally. Delphine says that it's a pot of boiling trouble cooking. Cecile scolds Delphine for talking back, and she also sounded a lot like Big Ma, who we know Cecile does not like. Then Delphine was explaining how she did not want to go back to the center because she proudly said that she was never going to go back there. But then she went back the very next day. Everyone was being very nice to her when she came back. Even Eunice sits down and mentions the day before, but did not say anything mean to her. Eunice and Delphine started to get along with each other. So now let's read chapter 22, Itsy Bitsy Spider. Vanetta couldn't stop practicing her poem. Well, it wasn't hers. She got it from a book of Negro poets at the center. If she couldn't sing her song, she would recite a poem all by herself. It wasn't enough for Vanetta to say her poem, which was actually Gwendolyn Brooks's poem titled We Real Cool. Vanetta tried to be her poem. Since there was no applause from Fern and me the first time around, she started up again, as zombie-like as she could, to imitate the toughs standing around outside the pool hall. If Big Ma heard Vanetta and saw her standing like a shiftless bum on the corner, we'd be on the next plane back to New York City. Vanetta was into a groove and couldn't be stopped. She started up yet again, saying, We real cool. We left school. As loud as she could, in case Cecile hadn't heard her. I would have done both Vanetta and Cecile a favor by giving her a swift kick, but I didn't care if Cecile yelled at her. I didn't care if Vanetta disturbed Cecile's peace of mind. So I let Vanetta recite on and on. So here it seems like Delphine is still pretty angry with Cecile about making the girls go back to the center, right? She knows and she understands that Vanetta's practicing her poem is very annoying, but she does not stop here because she kind of wants it to annoy Cecile. That's what it seems like. So here Vanetta goes again. We real cool. We left school. Vanetta was a perfectionist, but only about certain things. Things that would get her noticed or earn her applause. Big Ma said Vanetta wouldn't be such a show-off if Cecile had picked Vanetta up more when she was a baby, hollering in her crib. I didn't need a flash of memory to recall Vanetta's crying. She cried loudly and a lot. Our door was open and Cecile was in the living room, lying on our beat-up sofa. Cecile could hear Vanetta perfectly well. Vanetta had said this poem 7 times so far. I was certain her aim was to say it 10 times each night, but Cecile didn't let her get that far. It only took 6 angry foot stomps for Cecile to make it back to our room. Cut that crap out. That's not even a poem. I could have knocked that out in my sleep. You'd think Gwen Brooks was some sort of genius. Then she stomped away, this time into the kitchen. I heard her hand smack the swinging door hard. Back in the 4th grade, my teacher would have us lay our heads on our desks after we came in from recess. She would recite poetry to calm us down and get us ready to learn more science or history. Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson, Countee Cullen, and William Blake, all fine poets whom we should know. She'd say, well, I knew a real, live poet. I didn't know how fine Cecile's poetry was, but I had seen her writing poems in the kitchen and sometimes on the walls or on cereal boxes. Who else in my classroom could claim that they knew a poet and that she was their mother? So, on the afternoon that Robert Frost's horse had clip-clopped through the snow, I'd raised my hand and told the class my mother was a poet. Now, here we go. Here's another flashback happening, okay? Now, Delphine, Mrs. Peterson said. Nice girls don't tell their classmates lies. She'd kept me after school and told me she knew the truth about how my mother had left home, and that wanting a mother was no excuse for dreaming up one. I couldn't leave the classroom until I'd written, I will not tell lies in class, 25 times on the blackboard. And then I'd had to erase the board clean. So here, like I said, this is Delphine's flashback to her punishment for telling the class that her mom is a poet. So this connects to the theme of family. It's very difficult to be a part of this family that Delphine has, right? Delphine is being punished here because Cecile is not around. Okay, the teacher thinks that Delphine is making Cecile up, so she is being punished for it. Vanetta sulked, something pitiful, when Cecile told her to cut it out. Vanetta only heard her recitation stunk. She wasn't thinking about how Gwendolyn Brooks was a great Negro poet and that Cecile, also called Inzilla, was printing her own poems in her kitchen. Last year, Vanetta practiced her curtsying and more than she practiced her wings and time steps for the tip-top-tap recital. She fell on her family in the middle of her solo and was miserable for days. Usually, I'd pick up Vanetta's broken spirits until she was once again crowy and showy. But now I just let her sulk after she received no praise from Cecile. Serves you right, I thought. Just to be evil, I rubbed it in with an insult. I don't know why your lip is hanging, I said. You're just like her. We both knew which her I meant. I said that to make her feel mad on top of being hurt. Just like I know how to lift my sisters up, I also know how to needle them just right. Delphine is usually a motherly figure to her sisters, but here we see her deliberately trying to annoy Vanetta. So this is showing us that maybe she is still just a kid inside, right? We don't see a lot of these moments. And then here they go fighting back again. Am not, R2. We did a few rounds of that and then a final not and two. Okay, Vanetta, suppose you were going to be on TV. She perked up on that one. Playing Tinkerbell on Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. But it was PTA night, or school talent night, and your little girl, Ludi Bell, Fern added in, Ludi Bell, I picked up, glad to have Fern's support, had a part in the Itsy Bitsy Spider. In her Itsy Bitsy Spider costume. So this girl, Ludi Bell, this is who they are pretending is Vanetta's daughter. Okay? And she'd be practicing her Itsy Bitsy Spider song and dance for days, weeks, a whole 2 months. The Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout. I knew I could count on Fern to climb high with her tiny, sweet voice. Vanetta sat there, defiant, unmoved, proving my point. It was like looking dead at Cecile. A shiny white Cadillac comes to carry you off to be Tinkerbell on the TV. But your precious little girl, Ludi Bell. Ludi Bell is standing at the door in her costume, waiting for you to take her to school talent night. What would you do? That's easy, Vanetta said. I'd get in the shiny white Cadillac with my matching vanity bag and luggage. And what about your little girl in her costume? I asked. Yeah, what about Ludi Bell in her costume wanting to dance for her mama? Each and every one of us knew the feeling of having no mother clapping for us in the audience. Only Big Ma and sometimes Papa when he came home from work on time. Crowy and showy, Vanetta said. First of all, I wouldn't dare name her anything as silly as Ludibelle, and my little girl would be happy as I was a Disneyland movie star. She would tell her jealous friends at school, "There goes my mother on TV. I bet your mother just fries pork chops and wrings wet clothes. My mother is on TV flying around in a blue fairy dust, waving a magical wand in a cute sparkly outfit." The magic of Disneyland had won Fern over to Vanetta's side. It was all of that blue fairy dust and magical wand stuff. Fern's eyes twinkled as she imagined having a colored fairy mother. I was looking to get Vanetta's goat, but I only ended up losing Fern, and Vanetta was her old self. Delphine is trying to make a silly analogy about an imaginary daughter, right? That Vanetta would have to choose between her dream job and her showing up for her daughter. But it seems like Vanetta and Fern do not understand. And that's why you're like Cecile. You want to be the fairy on TV more than you care about how your kids will feel if they will miss you. Do not and do too went on between us until Cecile stomped back to the room and said, "Cut that crap out." And that is the end of chapter 22. Let's go on to chapter 23, movable type. We had another long day at the center. When I came into the kitchen to make spaghetti that evening, there was a stool by the stove. It was like everything else Cecile brought into her green stucco house, secondhand. Still, it was the unexpected and I welcomed it. I normally stood by the stove quietly while the food cooked. My feet always ached, but I never complained. Instead, I shifted my weight from one foot to the other and learned to make quick cooking meals. Cecile had allowed me inside her kitchen. She'd let me cook dinner, wash dishes, and clean up after myself. But she didn't really want me in there with her. She didn't want me stretching my neck over her way, ripping open the piece with any talking. The stool made things different. It was an invention for me to sit down and be there. Not talk, just cook. Be. So here we see Cecile had brought a stool into the kitchen for Delphine, which is a giant change, right? This is a big change from in the beginning when Cecile did not even let any of the girls in the kitchen, including Delphine. So let's keep going. As the spaghetti boiled, pictures flashed in and out of my mind. Flashes of sitting with Cecile and being quiet. It was the welcome that had brought me back, that I'd sat with her before and it was all right. Not in this kitchen, but in the kitchen in Brooklyn, back when Sarah Vaughan filled the house with her smoky voice. Vanetta was far away crying to be picked up, and Cecile's stomach was big with Fern. I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said I was born knowing what to do when I sat with Cecile. Don't cry, stay quiet, want nothing. I could talk, but I'd learned that as long as I was quiet, I was allowed to stay with her while she tapped against the wall with her pencil, wrote and said her rhymes over and over. Don't cry, stay quiet, want nothing. Then Fern had come, and days later Cecile left. Big Ma had moved in and told Pa, "That gal's dumb as a dry pump," meaning me. So dumb also means someone who cannot speak. It's not really used like this now anymore, though. Cecile wouldn't have minded if I had been born deaf and mute, but Cecile was gone. Big Ma was another story. I quickly learned to speak up around Big Ma. So Cecile and Big Ma, we learn, are opposites. Cecile is okay with having Delphine around as long as she is quiet and as long as she doesn't want anything, while Big Ma wants Delphine to kind of speak up. So that is only one way that they are opposites. After we ate our spaghetti, I washed the dishes and wiped the sink down. Cecile said, "I'd let you help me if your hands were clean." My hands were already clean. I had just finished washing dishes, but I soaped them with dishwashing liquid, then rinsed and dried them. "Stand over here." I stood where she told me. For a long while, that was all she said, that I stand right there. I looked down on the flat frame with wooden blocks on the wooden blocks were the metal letters facing backwards. Backward? They spelled out words line by line, but you would have to be able to read backward to read the lines. I wanted to be able to read them. On the counter next to the printing machine was a newly inked sheet of paper with the words printed in the right direction. Movable type. Push here. I move. There. Push. There. I move. 2 squares over by those squares. From under my feet, I land on the free square. Raise my rent. I pica elite. Courier. Sans serif. Pack light. Leave swift. I'm that type. I move. So, the literal meaning of this poem, she is just describing moving the letters around on the printing press, and then she describes buying letters for different fonts. So down here where it says Courier, Sans serif, these are all different fonts. Okay. If we dig a little bit deeper into this poem, we can figure out that she is like the fonts. She is that kind of person that moves quickly. So this is Cecile's poem, and then she signed it in Zillah. She took the sheet and hung it up to dry. I'm going to press down and roll a crank, she said. I figured I would catch on. She turned the lever on the side of the printing machine. Her weight pressed into the machine and down on the metal and paper. The rollers spun slowly. The paper pushed its way out onto the tray of backward letters. When the paper was fully inked, I believe she was pleased. Not that she was smiling or jolly or singing, but she liked what she had done. She studied her printed sheet and held it up to the light. The poem in black ink. Her name in Zillah in special shaped letters. Large, curved, lovely, and green. I thought about Cecile's poem. I figured it was about how she was the type not to be still. But I believed she liked this green stucco house. I think she liked being in this kitchen, mothering and praying over this big machine and these blocks of backwards letters. This was Cecile being happy. So Delphine thinks that she has finally found out what makes Cecile happy, which is printing her poems on this printing press that she has. See this here? I must have made a move like I was going to touch it. Cecile spoke sharply. I said, see, not touch. See? I nodded and put my hands behind my back. I was used to busy hands. To doing. I did what she said. I looked. Those are rollers. You feed the paper through the rollers. You feed it even if it is crooked. It's a waste of paper. You crank it steady, or it's a waste of paper, waste of ink. I watched her feed the paper between the rollers, turn the crank. Each time the ink spread evenly on the paper. She hung each sheet to dry. Go ahead, she pointed to the paper and the rollers and the crank. I almost didn't move. Come on, let's see if you can follow directions. I took a sheet from the paper sack and held it from end to end so it would go in even. No matter how much I told myself to keep steady, my hands made the paper shake. I was mad at my own hands. I didn't want Cecile to think I was afraid of doing wrong, but I was. I didn't look up at her to see if I had done right in her eyes. I just did what she said and turned the crank slow, hard, and steady until the paper came out on the other side. I hoped fully inked. She held up the newly printed sheet and pointed to a spot on the N in Zillah that missed the rollers. She shook her head. A waste of paper. So at first we see Cecile allowing Delphine to try out the printing press. So as long as she had clean hands and she paid close attention, which she did. But after Delphine tried it only one time, And she didn't get it perfect. It sounded like most of the letters were good except for that N in Inzilla. So when she doesn't get it perfect, Cecile only criticized her, saying that this is just a waste of paper. Cecile changes a little bit, but seems to go right back to how she was when Delphine can't do something perfectly on her first try. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 23.